an introduction to geoengineering, this course will be focusing on stratospheric aerosol dispersion by means of jet fuel additives. Now, most people get into the geoengineering field to save the planet because our planet does indeed need saving, but in terms of job security, this field of study guarantees your employment right out of college. Petrochemical companies today are paying enormous sums to cover up their mess. Notice I didn't say clean up their mess. Big oil couldn't possibly scrub the atmosphere anywhere nearly efficiently enough to undo the damage caused by petrochemical products. If you look at this article here, right out of Time magazine, it says August was the hottest month on record ever. They said the same thing about May 2014, just 3 months prior, the hottest month of May on record ever. The fact is that even if all the emissions stopped today, temperatures would continue to soar for the next 300 to 500 years due to the pollution that is already circulating within our environment. To see how alarming the change is today, we just have to look at Greenland. If you remember your 1980s style geography map, Greenland was a big block of ice. Well, not anymore. Greenland today is turning brown and in a hurry, and it's set to be a tropical location by this time next century. This recent GoPro recording of a jet fighter flying over Greenland reveals the current state of affairs quite clearly. Here we can see the true extent of global warming. The fighter jet has to fly for an extended period of time before reaching what remains of the Greenland ice sheet, and as it does so, it exemplifies the alarming rate of the melting. Notice the formation of rivers and lakes. Scientists on the ground are now recording the melting in Greenland in terms of gigatons per year. Imagine that. Gigatons per year. A gigaton of ice. 1 billion tons of ice. That's 2 trillion pounds in imperial terms. The Greenland ice sheet has lost 34 billion tons of ice per year between 1992 and 2001, but that rate has increased to 215 billion tons per year between 2002 and 2011. 215 gigatons per year. That's enormous, and it's a 750% increase from the 90s, and that rate is only going to go up. This alone should be raising alarm bells everywhere we go. Right now, there are island nations in the Pacific that are about to disappear, but the real danger here, my friends, isn't just hot summers and rising sea levels. It's the rise of atmospheric methane levels. Figure 1 here shows a huge and sudden spike in the concentration of atmospheric methane in the Arctic, with levels reaching above 2,000 parts per billion. A recent Russian-U.S. expedition has also found widespread, continuous, and powerful methane seepages. The cause of this sudden anomalous increase in the concentration of atmospheric methane has been attributed to the melting of subsea methane hydrates due to the rising of sea temperatures. This rise in temperature, which cannot be stopped, triggers the release of more methane from methane clathrate compounds buried in the seabeds and in permafrost around the world. Methane is a powerful greenhouse gas. It leads to further temperature rise and thus further methane clathrate destabilization. And this cycle of release has initiated a runaway process, as irreversible once started as the firing of a gun. This runaway process is what is scientifically referred to as the Clathrate gun effect, and will cause dramatic runaway global warming on a timescale of less than 1 human lifetime. This effect, this Clathrate gun effect, has been shown to have caused the Permian Triassic extinction event, an event where over 95% of all marine life became extinct some 252 million years ago, an event that all but erased life from this planet. And that's what we're headed for, extinction. And that's why geoengineering is so important. We are fighting a war against extinction. Every nation is currently participating, and we at Bellwether Engineering, we are the tip of the spear. We are fighting against our own plausible extinction. Today's fight against global warming occurs on many fronts, with the main battlefield occurring in the stratosphere. Our aim is to maintain a global shield of aerosolized particles to deflect sunlight away from the Earth. This results in a synthetic shade, and we do this quite simply by adding sulfates and other compounds to jet fuel. With over 100,000 commercial flights per day, the delivery process through commercial aircraft is as efficient as it is cost effective. The additives used are clear, odorless liquids that mix in with jet fuel at any proportion. Through combustion, the spiked fuel additives are released via the jet engine exhaust stream and dissipate according to what is called the rope and feather effect. As you can see here, the ejected particles begin their journey as a rope that looks similar to vapor condensation. And then the particles begin to feather in the wind in accordance to wind speed and direction. Dissipation patterns will vary based on delivery techniques and atmospheric conditions, but the aerosolized particulates will eventually disperse into a fine haze, giving the upper atmosphere a white powdery look to it. You can see this effect nicely if a building is between you and the sun on a clear day. By looking at the sunshine around the building, you will plainly see the particulates in the upper atmosphere at work. These particulates will remain suspended in the stratosphere until they drift back to Earth. There are obvious problems with that, but most scientists agree that the fallout from particulate injection is no worse than car exhaust, which is to say, it is highly toxic, but it's better than not doing anything. We are currently experimenting with different types of deployment methods to determine the most effective chemical combinations. Here you can clearly see the two-tone technique, where we are adding a super additive to the already mixed jet exhaust stream. If you're asking yourself why you haven't heard of this before, it's because a media blackout has been ordered for national security purposes, as to not panic the population. Because if people actually knew how close we were to truly destroying life on Earth, why, they'd probably stop watching television, they'd probably stop shopping, they might even boycott oil-based products, and that would be an utter disaster. Now we're going to cover some of the studies that pioneered the process of particulate injection into the atmosphere to further your understanding of the process. The first study we're going to look at is called Geoengineering the Climate, put out by the Royal Society. They start their sales pitch by asking, what can we do to mitigate global warming since emissions are running out of control and exceeding every projected scenario? They say that there are two main methods of climate management: CO2 removal and solar radiation management. Either remove CO2 or mask the effect, basically. They go on to say that carbon removal is preferable since it addresses the problem, but says that this is very slow. Then they talk about methods such as ambient air capture and ocean fertilization, fertilizing algae, that is, to make forests in the ocean for carbon consumption. Yet we know the dangers of that, since algae tends to be toxic in high concentrations, as we saw in the Toledo water scare, where people in Toledo and surrounding areas couldn't even drink their water anymore, and it got so bad that they couldn't find any water at the supermarket either. Scary stuff, folks. Moving on to the solar radiation management techniques, or SRM as they call it, i.e. chemtrails. They say that this is useful in an emergency situation, and that it may help us avoid going past the tipping point. Other studies that we'll cover in this broadcast reveal that this tipping point is actually an extinction level event. SRM techniques highlighted in the Royal Society paper includes painting buildings white, making clouds brighter by spraying seawater into the air, and last but not least, stratospheric aerosols. And notice the USGS stamp of approval on this slide. This study closes their sales pitch by saying stratospheric aerosols are the most effective and the most affordable method available when compared to other options, and it stipulates the need to work on public and political reactions to climate intervention technologies. Amazing. The next study we're going to look at is probably the most widely referenced white paper on the subject in the scientific community. It is called An Overview of Geoengineering of Climate Using Stratospheric Sulfate Aerosols, also known as the Rash and al. Paper, if I'm pronouncing that name right. This study highlights the need for stratospheric injections and highlights two delivery methods on page 8. First method is the insertion of a primary aerosol, such as fine sulfate particles, using an injector mounted on an aircraft platform cruising in the lower stratosphere. And the second method is using sulfur spike fuel additives employed to emit aerosol precursors in a jet engine exhaust stream. It's exactly what we're looking at. In each case, injection is assumed to occur with the initial plumes distributed throughout regions to avoid hot spots and to maintain the engineered layer. The next white paper on deck is something that can be found on Harvard's online archive system. The paper is entitled Stratospheric Injection of Reflective Aerosols or Particles by Means of Aviation Fuel Additive, written by John Gorman. Let me read you the abstract of this paper. Various suggestions have been made for stratospheric aerosols or particles to simulate the observed cooling effect of major volcanic eruptions. This paper describes the selection and preliminary testing of chemicals that might be used as aviation fuel additives to distribute two products, sulfur dioxide and micron-sized silica particles, from a high-flying commercial or military aircraft. The two chemicals tested are dimethyl sulfide to produce sulfur dioxide and tetraethyl silicate to produce silica particles. In a closed glass jar, both of these chemicals are indistinguishable from jet aviation fuel. Both are clear, colorless, and oily liquids. Both dissolve in aviation fuel in any proportion. Solutions of each of these chemicals have been burned in a paraffin blow lamp as a simple simulation of a jet engine combustion chamber. Observation of the combustion suggests that the desired chemicals are produced and that the silica particles are of smoke or mist quality. It is suggested that the solution would probably have no detrimental effects on the fuel tanks, pipes, pumps, or combustion chambers of the jet engine. This paper includes general facts about jet engines, aviation fuel, aircraft fuel systems, and flight plans. Well, to say the least, I found Mr. Gorman's work so interesting that I decided to go look for more. And by doing so, I stumbled upon a series of publications on the matter entitled Geoengineering Case Study, a memoranda of evidence by the Innovation, Universities, and Skills Committee. This memoranda of evidence includes not only some of Mr. Gorman's works, but the works of many others in the scientific community as well, with shocking statements and revelations such as large amounts of methane are stored in permafrost and even larger amounts in the seabed below. The release of either could be regarded as an extreme side effect of warmer seas and has been linked to the Permian extinction. I could almost read that again. But what it says there is that industry has pushed humanity to the brink of extinction, to an extinction level event, like the movie 2012. How can we possibly allow this to continue? Everyone should be out on the streets protesting, demanding immediate change to the way industry is conducting its business. If they were putting out Pintos again that exploded on impact, people would be demanding justice. But here industry has clearly trashed the planet and put the entire species at risk, and nobody says anything. Let's go watch the game. Stupidity will be our undoing unless we react strongly and boldly now. I still have so much more to cover on this topic, but that's going to have to be rolled into a part 2 in this series. In the meantime, this cause should be one of your highest priorities. Greedy corporations are destroying our planet, and not a single person is being held accountable. This is beyond criminal. It's genocidal, it's suicidal, and every other issue is a distraction